So I found you through Buddha at the gas pump,
Mhm.
and I was so happy to hear your journey of like embodying both life and children and work and finances and all of that, and also having your own, freedom, spiritual awakening, and not being attached to all these life stuff that can kind of weigh us down or just be a celebration. So I felt really it really was like medicine for my soul, because I also resonated with you that it's not many people who been on the spiritual path who are kind of saying yes to life, to like the more normal life with yeah, husband and wives, children, and the craziness of it. And I feel like that's actually true mastery of being able to hold hold both, or being connected to yourself fully and also to the world. So and I'm reading your book. I haven't finished it, but yeah, so thank you for being here.
I just gotta say, just being in your presence feels like such a gift. So
Oh,
thank you, really, really, and thank you for following what felt true for you in your heart and reaching out and wanting to connect. And I've been following your work. Thank you for all the ways in which you show up
mm,
and the way that you're sort of really speaking so beautifully about embodiment and with this very particular human form that you are living out of, and that you get to share in the ways that you do is really such a gift. So I feel very grateful for you.
mm, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like I've been feeling into the new earth, and how we can live so differently, and it's so beautiful because so many people are really waking up in their own unique way, and I feel like together now it's going to be way more strong to share this and to actually, yeah, come together and know that we're not alone on this journey, and that it's so many people are actually waking up that are not, in the ashrams or only in the monasteries and stuff, but in the day-to-day day life. And yeah, and so I feel this talks feels less of a interview podcast. It's more like an exploration and a conversation. And I have questions for you that I'm very curious to hear, and I want to hear your insights and your truth and your view. Um, and I listened to a few of your podcasts before that you've been in, and they're really really beautiful. And yeah, you've spoken about your childhood and you being growing up in a very wealthy family in Mexico City, and working, yeah, in finance and different. That world to me is like, I don't know that world very well, but so I don't know if you want.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
It's just different degrees of pretending that we do.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, thank you. Do you want to share a little bit about that too as a start, and then we can go from there. And then I would like to hear about when your awakening kind of happened, when you had the shift and so forth. But maybe you want to share a little bit about your the beginning of your life and you growing up and so forth.
Yeah, of course. I'm just finding this to be such a delight. So thank you. Um, as you mentioned, I grew up in a very unique kind of life environment with a lot of people that seem to have it all together and that were perceived by others to seem to have it all together. And I also grew up going to a Catholic school in Mexico City, where Mexico is very Catholic, and it was confusing at many levels. It was confusing because I would hear certain things coming out of I guess what the priests were saying, or what I believed, sort of this Christ consciousness. I wouldn't call it Christ consciousness back then. I would call it just this figure of Christ, and how he seemed to have lived and the disconnect between that and how I perceived that people that were speaking on his behalf were living. And that was confusing. Which is not too dissimilar to how I perceived people that seem to have it all together from a financial perspective or being admired, where you would imagine then they sort of be at a place of inner contentment and peace and sort of almost like an inner arrival. And yet they were still very much in the chasing mode. And I didn't have the, I guess, maturity or context back then to pick up on it fully, but there was something that was always like, oh, it's just, I'm so curious about this. So these questions were always there. I just learned from an early age to suppress those questions, to override them with what sort of the societal norms were telling me, which is just go quick, fast, there, wherever there is. And so I did a lot of that, a lot of running and a lot of chasing, mostly trying to catch up to somewhere that I had no idea where that somewhere was. And it's interesting because as I say that, I noticed that when I was chasing enlightenment in my spiritual path, I also didn't know what that was. Like I remember asking myself, what is the thing that I'm chasing? And I was like, I hadn't actually, which sounds so strange that I had been chasing it for so long, and I really hadn't questioned deeply what that was that I was trying to arrive at, like how I would know, or I had these ideas and these images of this gurus, and but those were just sort of things I had created in my mind.
Yeah, it's so beautiful for to see how that self is like leaning on even more more subtly in the spiritual realm, the spiritual ego still wanting to kind of get somewhere and become something. And yeah, it's the same self trying to be more and not less. When did you discover that illusion, so to say? Did you have, was it like a gradual kind of awakening to that, or because I also heard that you got so tired or exhausted, and that's where the medicine was, in a way, that you were outrunning, you went full on with this spiritual kind of drive as well, the same that you maybe had in the financial or your career. So if you want to share a little bit there.
Yeah, it was the same fuel of trying to get somewhere, of really saying this moment is not okay as it is, and I'm not okay as I am. And I was very invested in getting to a place where I felt whole or I felt complete. And I thought that the way to get there was to accumulate more, whatever that more was. And in the spiritual realm, it was more insights and more realizations and more awakening experiences. But it was very much oriented from this perspective of the seeker. Right? And what I find a lot of spiritual seekers, including myself, get caught up on is that we're so invested in this persona that we forget that having the persona as the core orientation in the first place is what creates the separation. It's what creates this idea that we're not enough. Right?
Yeah.
But we're still operating out of this persona that is convinced that at some point something's going to be enough for this persona to feel complete. And the shift is not this persona eventually having so much insight or so much awakening that the persona is enlightened, right? The big shift is noticing that this expression, this persona, the seeking in itself is enlightenment doing what it does.
So almost embracing the seeking and the path and the wanting to awaken, that's also grace, that's also source moving through and guiding us. Because in the spiritual traditions, they're talking a lot about like don't seek, you know, and how do you dissolve, or how do you see through that? Is it just about allowing the seeking and allowing the expression, or allowing all of it, or like what was the moment when you kind of when you saw through the seeking too? Because I feel like, yeah, you saw through that as well.
Yeah, there are a few little moments, and it's always easier in retrospect, right? You can paint a very pretty picture. It's like, oh, this is how it happened. Yeah, whatever. There's a lot of
Very
stumbling and
can be very messy on the way. And when you're in
very
it, you're
messy.
like, ow. Hurts.
Totally. Yeah, we turn a thriller into a romantic comedy, right? In retrospect. The I remember moments along the way when I would hear this invitation to start anew in the spiritual path, and that felt so scary. It's like, what do you mean start anew? And I could just like the way the body responds, right? It's like, no. I've gotten all the way over here. What do you mean start from scratch? And it was telling to me in those moments how I was holding these spiritual realizations and insights and levels as this new bank account. Right? It was my new measure of how much I had progressed. And this spiritual identity was very invested in more progression. So when I would hear these things of like, okay, imagine, are you willing to give up every insight, every realization you've ever had? Contraction and I would either convince myself or say, yeah, I am, but I wasn't really. And there were a lot of little moments like that where it was telling that there was still this orientation around this spiritual persona wanting to be enlightened. And I think that is beautiful. And it's part of the journey. And I think having judgments over that being in place or not, or trying to force it to not exist, is just more of that egoic persona wanting to achieve something, right? How it when if I could find like a place where some of those bigger shifts happened, or one of the biggest shifts happened, it was in the middle of a long silent meditation retreat. I mean, long for me, it maybe a 10-day, and I was well into it, and something happened where I really got to see my need for spiritual insights, this desire to get more, to understand more, to have greater revelations, to have meditations that were mind-blowing, to see everything as one, as just more of the same mechanics. That was almost like an addict saying, okay, let me just have one more. And then I'll stop seeking. Then I'll trust that this too is source. And just get this one. And it became so apparent, and how it felt. It's almost like I've described it like a balloon, and this balloon having a pinprick hole. Right? And I was injecting air into this balloon, and this balloon was my sense of self. And I was injecting it at times with financial possessions or material of any sort, or accumulation of recognition, or and in the spiritual realm, it was insights, it's realizations, it was higher consciousness. But I was always inflating it, and it was always kind of in a constant state of deflation with this whole. And I would feel good about myself at any given moment, depending on how big this balloon was and how big it was in comparison to how it was before, or in comparison to how it was related to other balloons that I saw out there. And in this silent meditation, what happened? Meditation, it almost felt like the whole just became a gash, and all of the container in which I was blowing the air all of a sudden had no more place for it to hold that air. And if you can just connect with the sensation in the body of what that would feel like, it was so disorienting. And the old ways in which I could relate to that fuel or to life I had no context for them.
Mm.
And it wasn't like the many realizations or experiences of oneness I had had before, right, which are elated and high. And this was a very like shoot kind of moment. It was like a deep loosing,
Mm.
like the seeker truly seeing the game for what it was.
Mm. Was it a time of like disorientation, or was it um like did you, and maybe that is still the ego, you know, trying to orient, right? But if it's no separate self there, then maybe you're fully okay with the with having no location or no um that makes sense. Like, was it anything that felt um yeah, that you have no guidance, or was it fully just being guided by you, by source, by like how, because I think many people are afraid to like go in that extent because they feel like who's gonna drive their car kids to school, who are gonna, you know, do the job, or if you have those responsibilities in life. So was it a space of just spaciousness for a while, or was it easy to kind of be in life with that openness?
I love that question. I think it's important to back up a little bit. I'll speak to that, but I want to speak to how much that played out in my mind. The fear of like,
Hmm.
I can't really let go, right? I
Yeah.
can't. It's almost like I would reach. How I would have described it, it's almost like I would reach the edge of a cliff. I say, just jump. I'd be like, what do you mean? Everything in me is like contracting back. I'm not jumping. And the way that my mind would say is like, well, if we jump, then I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm just going to be sort of floating around, and I'm going to be like Ramana Maharishi, sitting down for weeks in a cave or years in a cave and lose my legs, and and it, I got to tell a story which was interesting. I was at a retreat once, and I remember this beautiful woman, Dorothy Hunt. I don't know if you've ever come across Dorothy.
No,
She's lovely.
I
She's
would,
lovely.
I would check her out.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I only went to one of her retreats once because I was gonna like I was looking for everything. Like I was just who's out there? Where can I get a retreat now? Uh, but I got lucky with all my teachers, and at one point during one of her retreats, I heard I need to be willing to give up those things that I covet the most, right?
That you,
and that was that I covet, that I hold on to dearest.
mm,
And I remember one of the thoughts that came forward in that moment was like, would I be willing to be very ill,
mm,
like paraplegic, and that's where the mind goes, right? Like it tries to go to the most extreme. It's like, oh, really? How
mm,
about that? And I noticed all the fear around it, and I was like, hey, and I was in such a resolve internally, like, yes, even that I'll take. And she invited people to share, and the next person that shared said, 2 years ago, I I decided that I would be willing to even be sick to get enlightened. And I've spent the last 2 years in the hospital, in and out. And it was like perfectly designed for me to go like, oh. So I, uh, I want to really normalize, I think, fear in people, and the part of us that it is not rational for that part of us that has been operating for so long
mm.
to step off of that cliff, right? Uh,
Yeah.
it is very counter to sort of what we've learned. This deep existential fear of I must exist is
Mm,
really what it boils down to. Has a purpose, right? And And I think if we can accommodate our relationship to that by recognizing that it serves and that it's part of it, and not trying to sort of, like I did, sort of carve it out of my body, but relaxing into it, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, it's almost like the survival or reptilian, or like the animal energies on in us is only here to serve life. In a way, it's here to make sure life is continuing on. So it's so, I think, beautiful if we can hold that also in love, and love that part that is only trying to live, just like a flower is, trying to find its way and receive the sunlight and like being nurtured. And it's a very innocent energy in a way. And I mean, I can relate to that too for myself. Of I've been having all these things in my head, in the back of my neck, and I feel like it's kind of the energy of grasping, trying to hold on and not let go. But it feels like a very old energy, like this energy in the spine, the kundalini, the snake energy, not fully plugging into like source consciousness, but holding on to the old structures, and can so relate to this cliff. Like I feel like I've been standing on the cliff for a while, and I'm like, part of me is like, the jump, I small self can't really do the jumping. The jumping has to come from a bigger space. And I heard you also talk about the embodiment of like really feeling it in the body, these energies that wants to just come home into love. They want to be loved. They don't want to be hammered down or changed or manipulated, conditionally loved, like I will love you if you go away, or
Totally.
and in a way all these contractions are such a gift of learning how to love. How do you love these parts of ourselves just feel so achy and painful and contracted, and how can we even love the ugly, the deep traumas, the shit in the world? Like, it's so much craziness going on right now in the world as well, with all the structures, in my opinion, trying to find new expressions that are more of an expression of the higher consciousness that I feel is happening. But anyways, a few spots here that I also wanted to touch on was the Christ consciousness that you touched on in the beginning, and on a bigger picture, like in humanity, how do you? Because they've been talking about the second coming of Christ, and or more the more new age spirituality is talking about a shift in consciousness, and that we are entering into the golden age. And do you have any notions of the more collective energetics, and or when you have been having that transcend or knowing of the true self, maybe it doesn't matter how the world will unfold?
I want to circle back before I address some of these things. I'm keeping tabs of the what you were speaking. We were speaking about the fear, and then if I really let go, then my life will fall apart. I think part of why I'm not a teacher. I'm not really apparently now I'm an author, but I'm not. That's not really what my life is. And what I really wanted to hear was, it doesn't fall apart, right? Or it didn't fall apart for me. Not only did it not fall apart, but the whole world opened up differently. And I can be so fully here, human, and simultaneously all of it.
Mm.
And I can make so much space for caring, for loving, for feeling, because previously that capacity was limited to what was desirable and undesirable. And now
Mm.
that doesn't mean that I don't have desires or that I don't have preferences, but even those are held within a larger context.
Mm.
So it invites me to feel things that I had never fully experienced. So if I circle it back to, does it matter when you're in that sense of oneness? Does it matter what happens to the world? So much.
Mm.
It matters so deeply. And at some level, we have greater capacities to play our part,
Mm.
but we spend a lot less time thinking about what should and shouldn't, and find ourselves more fully in the moment showing up. Less time thinking about what others are doing wrong or politics, or we're even thinking, I spend very little time thinking of where is this going, and is there a second coming, or is there an awakening, or is there, and I just know what right now needs to feel like.
Mm.
Not what needs to feel like, but how I can bring all of my capacities.
Mm.
Because part of what this larger context allows is that redemptive love that you were speaking of, right? That can love all those parts of ourselves, that can change the relationship with all those things that arise from one of antagonism to one of sort of love. And I like to use the word curiosity,
Mm.
because then that's just not internally, that's also externally.
Mm.
Then the politicians or the global warming or unconsciousness or whatever we want to call it, in the absence of separation, it's just how do I get to redeem all of those parts, which is very different than at the beginning in the more transcendent quality, right? In the transcendent quality, after that balloon popping, let's say, the story's solidity. So it's like, well, nothing's real. It's all I.
Mm.
And I think a lot of spiritual people that have deep realizations, it's very tempting to get stuck there because it's very comfortable.
Mm.
And I came across a lot of teachers that were there, and that were speaking of the abstractness and the emptiness of it all. And to your point earlier, I think that's true,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the whole truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like almost the full circle has to also to bring the medicine back to the village or to the community and to the world. Like the world is the most difficult place to be fully in source if you get triggered and so forth. So that's where you're going to meet where you're holding or where you are triggered. And it's easy to be in these beautiful environments and completely drop in and connect to the sacred or to be as home within at all times when you're there. But I feel like that what it feels to me is this time now where we're all invited to actually bring it back to humanity in all our unique ways. And it doesn't have to be speaking that, it can be through all these different vessels. And I think that's why I was so curious about your journey. And also I know you're running a few businesses and you're very active in the world as well. And how are you making decisions? Are the decisions coming from, it's like after I guess we've been seeing through the duality, maybe it's just one decision. It's never, or if that makes sense, is it something like your true self is making the decision? So it's not so much navigating anymore. It's more of a clarity on what needs to happen and what needs to fall away or what who to connect to and like how are you navigating the dance of of life, being fully you and fully. And another point, sorry, I'm wondering a little bit, but another point that you were sharing, yes, that kind of getting stuck in the oneness, or staying in the yumminess at home within, and sometimes this spiritual bypassing, that we hear all these words about, yeah, oneness and be nothing, no one here, and so, but it's more of a mental idea. Like, how can we fully know these things in our hearts, in our wombs, in our bodies, in to really, really feel that on all the levels of being?
I heard two. One of them was choice, and the other one sort of this oneness, transcendent quality of empty, formless.
Yeah.
On the choice side, it almost feels like you're asking me, why did you choose to purse your lips just then?
Wait,
Or
what?
to move? Why did you choose to purse your lips right then? Like,
Oh,
you would
yeah.
be like, well, I didn't, or your hand, right? It's like, well, I don't know that I really chose it. It feels that instantaneous.
Mm.
And I used to be someone that was very, I can still be very analytical at times. But I don't remember the last time I had to sit back and make a choice.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that, and that doesn't mean that there's clarity, because it almost feels like the me wants clarity so that it doesn't do something wrong.
Mm.
Right? It's like, give me, reduce my chances of messing up or of hurting. So get me clarity, and I'll get enlightened. So I'm super clear,
Mm-hmm.
or so I don't get hurt, or so I, and I think which is beautiful and innocent. And sometimes we require an analytical capacity to come online and make it. So if something very grounded, right? Because I love grounded examples. Like, I need to I don't know. I don't think that I'm disclosing anything that I shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
I own shares of SpaceX, for example, right?
Mm.
An amazing company,
Mm-hmm.
and I need to decide whether I'm going to sell it or I'm not going to sell it. For example, that seems like a big choice, right? And from a previous perspective, that would be like, oh, I need to choose: am I selling it or am I not selling it? Right now, it feels like I'm just continuing to walk until I decide.
Mm.
And I like giving the analogy of the hike, right? Because we've all hiked, and at some point in the hike, we may need to decide, or am I going left or am I going right? But most of the time during our hike, we're not overthinking every step.
No.
And when it's time to go left or right, it's more likely that when we get there, we're not saying, okay, what decision am I making? These are all the pros for going left. These are all the pros for going right. And it becomes more like a natural impulse. Sometimes we may say, well, it looks a little bit sketchy over there, so I'll go this way. But it becomes part of that journey. And those capacities become enhanced, in my experience, as opposed to diminished.
Mm.
And this, we can call it choice, but this fullness of where I stand at any given moment is no longer outsourced to, did I do it right or did I not do it right?
Mm. So everything becomes the right, in a way. Every step is the right.
Yeah, because there's no longer an idea of what should be.
Yeah.
And if there is an idea of what should be, then that's just seen as a momentary expression of like, oh, there's that part that thinks it knows. Like,
Right.
it's no longer seen as an issue.
Mm.
Because I think part of what we get when we get that transcendent is that or I certainly was very invested in getting to a place of perfect clarity, perfect oneness, total joy and bliss, constant Sachitananda out there, right? And that's so I think that's what keeps a lot of us spinning. We associate source with only the experiences that we deem as good.
Mm. Yeah, the holy ones.
The holy ones.
Not the
Yeah.
demons in the darkness, but that is also in source, as source, playing their part, doing what they need to do somehow. Yeah.
And then back to what you were saying about the blooming, I think the the capacity to recognize that full expression of humanity in all of its forms as source, and the intimacy. See, because we may start off with I'm going back to the other part where we're saying let's love all those parts of ourselves,
Mm,
but it can get to a place where it's no longer loving those parts of ourselves, but there's such an intimacy
mm,
where the separation between this perceived lover and unworthiness, right, for lack of a better word, is no longer there. And there's so much, and from that place we don't mind all of the forms. We don't have someone that is saying those are the right forms and those are the wrong forms, or we need to be in this state of oneness because that's what enlightenment looks like.
mm.
And if I'm invested in appearing enlightened, that's just more of that egoic, because from that perspective I need to be very protective, and then my humanity is almost like I need to manage it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe sometimes in that journey too, when we become way more sensitive, that sometimes maybe we do pull back from life for a bit and we sit with that inner root or rooting into source instead of to the external that we've been in. We're almost like pulling out for a while to establish that sense of the true self, of what is, yeah, the non-becoming, to then open. But I mean, I've done a little bit of that, the pulling back, and now I'm feeling like I'm being called to come out of my hiding, and it's come, all these fears comes up around that, because it feels very vulnerable to be in life, to be seen in something that I don't even, I don't know, like I feel like I have a sense of something way deeper, and yet I don't really know what it is. It's like, um, and I have moments of these, I don't know, just feeling fully home in a way, and then yeah, when life comes in, it hits me in places and it hurts, and it's a little scary, like too, to be out in the world like fully as you are, in your openness, in your vulnerability, in your intimacy, and um, yeah, and and also like the safety, because we do have human bodies and all of that, um, and money, and attracting the right things for us and finding our path. Um, I'm I'm in a place right now where I'm finding, like, I love healing and sound and breath and all these methods and ceremony. I've been in iboga ceremonies, and that's where I kind of really felt my heart were just sparking of, like, remembrance of the cosmic, and like the the all these magical things. But I also saw that that's not it. I had these such beautiful visions, and also this like homecoming into kind of the cosmic womb, or the more like star energy, um, and this expansion of the heart, and the heart just wanting to sing out to the whole universe. And then in that emptiness, or going even further, I had this moment of like, it doesn't matter how deep I go into the universe, how far out, I'm never going to find it there. And that's when something dropped, and and now I feel like it's inwards, but it's like, when do you know that you know? Because I think many people have kind of stages of unfolding or awakening, but when do you know that you're fully home into home in source? That is a question that I've been actually pondering about, because I've been having a lot of doubt on the journey, and I thought that doubt was kind of, I hold on to doubt so dearly because I felt like doubt is the portal into my truth. But it's all this sneaky illusion. Do we have a choice in the awakening, or does the awakening happen when it's meant to for us, for this body, mind, spirit? So many feeling like sharing this.
You know what I love so much is that you give voice to all of us. You give voice to. I wouldn't have been able to verbalize the way you did because I was too invested in appearing a certain way or in my spiritual persona, and that was part of what I think was a disservice to me.
Mm,
And so I think your earnestness, because there's a distinction between doubt and earnestness, right?
mm,
Your earnestness is your biggest asset from my perspective in the journey, not yours as people's, to be
mm.
able to discern when this is sort of a protection or a hijacking, and not to judge it, but just to recognize it. Um, that's so powerful. And I want to really highlight and celebrate that in you. And there was a teacher that said, doubt is the last thing to go.
Mm,
And I think the opportunity to live so fully that you get to offer doubt the full experience of being, rather than doubt being a trigger for you to find resolution. What if doubt was in and of itself just had been waiting its entire existence for you to allow it to exist?
mm. Yeah, that resonates.
The same for your fears. So all those fears that would come up, especially you embodying the woman body, right? The feminine, female, in a world where there's been so much antagonism towards the feminine, towards the female, where protective layers have had to been erected for so long.
Yeah, I really feel that in the body of the feminine, like it is a different, it's almost like a little different awakening for the feminine.
You get to experience and redeem, not redeem in the sense of curing them, redeem in the sense of giving those fears the consciousness they've been waiting to experience, been experienced with. Like, how many times has the fear of being a woman been experienced consciously,
Mm.
right? So then the relationship to these fears and these things, you grow in your capacity to allow them to be so fully here.
Yeah, it's it's deep. My heart is like, yay.
Yeah,
It's like, yes, please. Mm,
because then these fears or these things are not in the way of you experiencing home, right?
mm,
They're just coming home. They're being reminded of where they exist by being experienced consciously, by being so intimately curious with them.
mm. Yeah, I feel like the passion in my heart feels also about the remembrance of the feminine, um, of feeling safe and home in the feminine expression of the divine. And I feel like many of us, women and men, doesn't really know how that looks like. So it's a rediscovering of the like feminine expression in the awakening. Because even, yeah, I think essentially we're all source spirit, but I am in a female body and you are in a male body, and we do have different kind of expressions or vessels where, and how these energies and emotions and stagnations, or even like many lifetimes of programming, and the witches being burned at the stakes and the healers being burned, and also for the masculine, like the or men, um yeah, like the mystics and all the people that been bearing light have been mostly punished also a lot. And I feel like it's a deep fear in every human, like how would it be to be fully revealing this or being living in this, as it's been killing me many lifetimes before, perhaps, or we know it in the story of Jesus being at the cross. And yeah, and the feminine also through the stories, like the feminine path have been so in the shadows. It haven't been many stories of the feminine awakening, even in Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and where is her story, um and like really finding it deep within, without, I feel like, um we have this idea about the feminine, what she is, who she is, and so forth. But how is she when she really comes through? Like I had a dream about this volcano, of a fiery woman coming out of the volcano. And it was so much fire and like power there that it feels overwhelming. And I've been having many talks to friends that are also on this journey of discovering who we are. And it comes down, almost when you go deeper and deeper, it becomes a lot. It's just such a strong energy, um, that has been dormant for so long, or been pushed down or cut down, or um, and inviting that back home again. Yeah.
Speaking from the male masculine perspective, I am so deeply sorry. I mean, I'm so sorry that made it so to exist. And I've been so afraid of your power.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank you. It's such a, it's so innocent on both sides, and yet it is time. It's time. And part of what you get to offer is the conscious embodiment, not just of the full empowered feminine expression, out of the resistance towards that. You get to fully embody the parts of you that contract, the parts of you that are afraid, the parts.
Yeah. Yeah, sitting like this, it feels like a gift. But I know when I'm out in the world, it's gonna go like this again. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the masculine too. I heard this Native American talk about the masculine because it's so much of the feminine, of like her wounding, but also the men have been in the wars. They've been seeing their children die. They've been seeing their kids been taken away and killed, perhaps. So it's like on both sides. It's just been a lot of pain there, and it's no one's fault. It's no one doing it in a way. It's just been these, um, more unconscious ways of humanity that we've been all going through, but more and more so people are knowing their true being. And I think the suffering, hopefully, I mean, first of all, it guides us home. If we wouldn't have that knock on the door of something aching and painful, and then we wouldn't take the path. So in a way, that's also a gift. The suffering, the pain, the ache. Yeah, and I'm very grateful too that you're a father and you have a family, and it seems like, from what I heard also in your other sharings, it feels like you're really learning from your children. You're really, seems like you're holding such a beautiful space for them to like be in their creative, magical innocence and their discovery of their themselves and their world. And you want to share a little bit about being a parent on this journey and in relationship and on having a family? And
It's incredible. It's really redefined all the definitions I had about perfection, because part of what I get to do is I get to witness them as they are and witness the parts of me that during those age stages were not embraced, or and all the misunderstandings that I grew up around. And to notice how at times I will approach my children from those places of old assumptions, and I have to slow down and really question, oh wow, yeah, no, that's an old one. And what has been one of the greatest shifts in parenting for me is that I've recognized that the more of my humanity I can bring to that equation, the more, see, because then when, rather than trying to be the perfect parent, I recognize that when I mess up, it's an opportunity to take responsibility and course correct and show them what it's like to mess up. And that feels like such a gift, because then they are free to mess up in front of me, and they are free to take responsibility and say, I'm sorry, or say, this wasn't how I wanted to react. And it's almost like we're learning together sort of how to navigate this thing. And from a psychological perspective, there are so many misunderstandings and woundings that happened, I think, to me, but I think to most of us as we're growing up, that children, I think that's part of why parenting is so difficult for people, because they do bring up some of those triggers, right? And as parents, it's normal to sort of close down, distance, sort of blame out there, or try to manage. And I want to invite every parent to see if they could just shift that relationship with their mess ups
Mm.
into one of being able to model what it's like to mess up
Mm.
and own it. Yeah.
Right. Not take, not be shame or shaming yourself or guilting yourself, but owning it, um, and holding space for the messiness of humanness.
Yeah.
So beautiful, and it probably creates such a freedom in them then to be curious and to fall and to rise and to really live and play and explore.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And in me, right? It becomes this shared curiosity of life, and a constant questioning that I know anything,
Mm.
right? Like, and it's such a tricky balance as a parent where you still have a certain, and they're teenagers, so they're a little bit older, but where you still have a role that you're playing. It's like, oh, well, a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right. But I notice how much of my protagonism in their lives, probably 90% of it was unnecessary.
Mm.
These ideas, no, without me, they go totally off course.
Mm.
Not at all. Not at
No.
all. It's kind of the same as life, right? It's like the same thing. Oh, if I truly let go, then it'll all go
Mm.
go to shoot. But no, I think things seem to find their way, and
Mm.
yeah, and we just bring our heart and our mind to every situation in the way that we can,
Yeah, so beautiful.
and we touched a little bit on the body, but the fact that the feminine tends to have more direct access to the body than the masculine, at least from the people that I've been mentoring along the way, is such a gateway to what's here right now.
Mm.
And if we can use our bodies, our energies, our contractions, whatever it is, to get curious with them and to explore them,
Mm.
to me, that becomes a direct entry point into that is beyond sort of this linear time that the mind operates in. And then the invitation is that curiosity that we've been speaking of, right? Which is sort of the balm of love. It's like, oh, what is present right now? Because when you were sharing earlier, I go out into the world and it'll contract. It's like, oh, what does contraction feel like?
Mm.
Can I drop into my body and fully experience that contraction in that intimate way that I know you can?
Mm. Mm.
So I'm just grateful
Mm.
that we get to share it. There was a teacher that used to quote someone and said, "It's we're buddies in the bathroom,"
Mm.
and that's what it feels like.
Mm. Beautiful. It's been such pleasure talking to you, and you have such a warm and like trusting energy. I just feel very safe and loved hearing your view, your way, your path, your um, yeah, your unique expression. Um, and what is your steps ahead? Do you know where you're gonna go or fly or do, or are you gonna write another book or?
I have no idea. I do know that I've been recording, finished recording an audiobook, so I'll release that, but it's the same book in audio.
Mm.
Uh, some people have been asking me to write a parenting book, so I may do that.
Mm.
And what was just coming forward a second before you asked that, which
Mm.
is interesting, was I'd love to do more of these. And if you want to invite people and just online, offline, just sit in dialogue together, just be curious together,
Yeah,
just putting it out
beautiful.
there. Mm.
Such an honor to meet you on screen in your presence. And yeah, hoping to see you again. And yeah, Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for all you do.